Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. It's my pleasure this week to talk about a subject that is, well, near and dear to most Americans, and that's how we treat our veterans. We have very old veterans, sort of medium-age veterans, and now we're having younger and younger veterans as the result of Operation Iraqi Freedom. My guest this week is the director of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Nebraska, John Hilgert, also a former state senator. Yes. Left the State Senate, or the unicameral, to take this job on.
That's right, November of 2001.
You have a special place in your heart for veterans. Obviously, I'm sure your father or relative, but you are a veteran yourself.
Certainly, yeah. My father was in World War II, a combat engineer, U.S. Army. I was in the U.S. Army as well. I was with the 1st Infantry Division out of Fort Riley, Kansas, and served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
So you know what's going on now, and you have some perspective from all the veterans you've been talking to
I have some perspective.
That November, what they're going through. We've got veterans' needs and services spread kind of all over the universe, and a lot of veterans don't know what they have coming or how to advocate for themselves. Not that they're not capable, but it's sometimes a pesky system. What exactly do you do in the department, not you yourself, but your staff?
Sure.
Very small staff, I might add.
Very small staff, yes. Well, what we do is certainly we advocate for veterans. We have a couple of programs, and largest amount of our work out of our department comes from our state service office. We have 4 service officers and 3 support staff, and 36,000 of Nebraskans have their powers of attorney with our state service office.
Now explain what kind of a power of attorney is, because they can be very broad.
Well, we represent the veteran to the United States Department of Veterans Administration, the Veterans Benefit Administration specifically, for compensation and pension, and well over $200 million a year comes into the state in benefits to Nebraska veterans.
It's a limited power of attorney that allows you to sort of sign things and do things because they're spread all over the state and may not be able to physically do that.
In fact, our office is in the basement of the regional office in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is quite a bonus. If we have a question with a rater, a federal employee that's rating a certain case, our staff can actually literally go up the stairs and talk to them about it. So it's a really unique opportunity to advocate for our veterans, and they do a fantastic job.
So you're close to the feds in
We're very
essence,
close.
Physically close.
And they don't charge us rent.
Nebraskans are very happy about that,
That's
I'm
right.
sure. But we have a lot of older vets. I mean, we saw how many veteran stories. We relived them during the dedication of the World War II monument, and we put a nice spotlight on our older veterans. Do they understand what their benefits are? The younger ones do, but
I think all veterans need to sometimes take a refresher course. Sometimes when you get out of the service, it's the last thing you want to do is talk about your benefits and so forth. You think you'll never need them. And so even the older veterans are sometimes rediscovering the benefits that they're able to get. We had recently, there was a story of someone who was a POW. And there's a lot of benefits available for those individuals who are POWs.
Are those injured in action that still have a disability, or?
Well, when you.
I mean, there's state benefits too in different states. I was checking around. You know, fishing licenses if you're disabled from a war.
There's a lot of different state benefits.
That may not seem huge. I laugh now, and I'm not even laughing, but people might think I'm making light of it.
No,
they may not seem huge to some people, but they're huge to the veterans.
Certainly. We have a Nebraska Veterans Aid Fund that we can give temporary assistance to veterans who have a temporary unforeseen emergency. That has been working rather well over the years.
Now, is that the fund that's in the news?
That's in the news a little bit. The fund was, Nebraska didn't give bonuses. Some states, when you would return from your war, World War I, World War II, et cetera, and they would give a bonus, $150, here's a bonus. Nebraska, and the leadership of our World War I veterans did this. They said, let's pull all of our bonuses together, let's establish a fund, and use that fund to generate interest, and whenever any of the World War I veterans would need some money, we'll be able to get that money from that fund, and the interest is given away every year. Every war, World War II, Vietnam, and Korea, they've added to this fund, and now it's grown to be rather large. of late, in 1987 actually, for the last 17 years, we've had to cap that fund. $1,500 for this, $3,000 for a funeral. Recently, those who are applying for assisted technology, wheelchair ramps, chairlifts, were unable to draw from that fund, simply because the demand on that fund far outpaced the interest that was generated by the fund. So we're trying to bring to light the fact that we need some more resources to match mission. We had 1,700 applications, and we almost denied a third of them in our last year. So, you know, when 1/3 are denied for whatever reason, you know, and partly because we're becoming more and more restrictive, we need to look at that fund. We need to see, you know, is there other ways that we can stretch those dollars, and there's other ways that we can give support to our veterans who are undergoing temporary unforeseen emergencies.
Is this the same fund that involves the Attorney General's opinion?
Attorney General's opinion.
The State Attorney General.
The State Attorney General, John Bruning. The Nebraska Veterans Advisory Commission was presented, like they have been for the last 17 years, with different options. We have X number of dollars coming in, we have this demand. What do we do? And they instructed the department to do several things. They said no more assisted technology. They said a one-time dental benefit of $1,500, and if anyone's had some dental work done, sometimes it doesn't go nearly far enough. They said go through them with a fine-tooth comb, get pickier, if you will. And then the other thing, they said let's review our statutes. Are we serving who we should be serving? And there was some ambiguity in Nebraska statute. Nebraska statute said honorable discharge or its equivalent. And they instructed me to ask the Attorney General, John Bruning, to take a look at that statute. Does that include general discharges? Was the question. And the Attorney General said, John, you've been operating in a fashion that's clearly wrong, and in order to serve general discharges, we need to have specific legislation to do that. Because clearly a general discharge is not equivalent to an honorable. You lose your GI Bill, civil service retirement credit, and other things. I fully expect, and I believe the governor does too, the legislature to restore or to expand, depending on your perspective, those services, the availability of those services to individuals who have a general discharge. But as that's restored, we have a unique opportunity here to go back to our policymakers, to talk about what resources we have available, and to talk about how the fund's being used. And we're going to do that, and hopefully we can get some extra help for that fund for those veterans.
Well, here's the question. I don't think that there's a person in our state that says our veterans who served, well, there might be a few, they're just strange people, but who say that we need to treat those that don't have the funds and need the help, that have served, these little helps, and they aren't big helps that we're giving them, at least on a state level.
Yeah,
they're just
2-month maximums, and there's limitations. You're
and
right.
how many times, I'm sure, and whatever. But we only have so much money.
Right.
We have now a case where our state fair supporters are asking us to go, they will be asking us to go start changing the way we spend the lottery money, for example. And once that happened in other states, the original intention they lost their money. There's only so many places to get money. The lottery sounds pretty good, but there's only so many places, and until we get out of this financial situation.
Well, that's true. On the other hand, maybe there's some other ways there's something I want to look at specifically, and general assistance, for example, and some county veteran service officers. Every county in Nebraska has a county veteran service office. Right. We check for eligibility, whether you can be one, if you've been a resident of the state and have the appropriate discharge. But other than that, we don't task, hire, fire, discipline. We just have a good cooperative relationship most of the time. But every county has one of these. And I've heard reports from some counties where a Nebraska citizen goes into general assistance, and the moment general assistance finds out that you're a veteran, they send you away. They say go to the county veteran service officer, go to the Nebraska Veterans Aid Fund.
Or maybe a prioritization in how services are.
Now, to me, we talked about what the fund is. That's a benefit. It's not a segregated system for veterans. In some states it is, and quite a good one. I just talked to one of my counterparts in Massachusetts this morning, Boston specifically, and they do have a segregated system, general assistance for veterans and non-veterans. But to me, every veteran should have every benefit that every Nebraskan has. and then this is a
And then
benefit
something
on top of
because
it.
they're a veteran.
And that alone, I think, would make a real difference in our fund and how it's used.
Well, the thing is, I'm sure that a lot of the people affected, I was reading a news story that you're quoted in about this opinion by John Bruning, and I don't understand the difference between an honorable and a general. And I mean, honorable is obviously honorable,
Right.
but I don't know, is general discharge bad? Were you bad?
It
Well,
could be.
you could-
but there's 5 different discharges: honorable, general, other than honorable, bad conduct, and dishonorable. Obviously, everyone knows about dishonorable, and everyone knows about honorable. But the other 3, it's not. You don't get all the benefits that you do with an honorable discharge, and most significantly with the general discharge, you lose your GI Bill, which is very important, I think. You lose civil service retirement credit and some rehabilitation. So it's one step below an honorable. But you can apply, by the way, to have your general discharge upgraded. And I think every county veteran service officer who would have a veteran that comes in their office with a general discharge, it would seem to me that they would apply for that upgrade. And it would surprise me when some, haven't. But it's not the worst. It's not the best. And there's lines all over. And what we're trying to do is say, if the policymakers want us to serve general discharge, that's fine. I support that. But let's make it specific and give me the resources to do it. There's so many empty promises, if you will, if you say, well, we're going to make this one group eligible, but yet we don't have the money to serve them. What sense is that? So we do want to have a discussion about resources when we expand it to include general discharges.
What are some of the other, glancing at some of the websites and yours, there's burial, there's a laundry list that is pretty similar throughout. I don't know if those are federal benefits.
Many of them are federal benefits, and every state, I believe every state and territory, has mechanisms in place to advocate for the veteran and help them fill out the paperwork, navigate the system to access those benefits. This Nebraska Veterans Aid Fund is fairly unique and fairly important and fairly effective throughout the country. And we potentially have the framework to do a lot of good for our veterans, especially for the funerals. We will pay up to $3,000 for a burial. You were a veteran, here you go. And we just need to have, again, I come on back to that all the time, we need to have the resources to do it.
Okay, if the burial benefit is a federal benefit, right?
There's a few $100s if you want a marker and so forth.
Okay.
But we go far beyond that.
Oh, the state does?
The state does. And that comes out of your Nebraska Veterans Aid Fund. And a lot of what we do is pay for burials. People who can't afford it, and also as far as crematoriums as well. But, you get more picky. For example, here's a good one. If a veteran said, well, I had the money to pay my rent, but it was stolen. Years ago, we may have not asked for a police report. We do now. And this is ways that we've been getting more and more, it's been getting more difficult to apply for these funds. And it's all driven out of, we have so much need and we have limited resources. Case in point, the last quarter, and this is another issue that someone's going to look at. We have a 28 to 29, depending on how the stock market's doing, $1 million fund. It generated in the first quarter $183,000. And we averaged $80,000 a month in the first quarter in disbursements. We're not keeping up with the interest that's coming in. We want to look at how the money's invested. We want to look at if there's other community resources. There's a lot of things we can look at, and of course some veterans organizations have passed resolutions at their state conventions to actually look for general fund appropriation. So
obviously we're not the only state faced with, yes, it's a little bit of a smorgasbord on what the individual states do, but obviously we're not the only ones facing a large number of veterans and a quickly now growing number of veterans.
Right.
In fact, the federal government is facing shortfalls in at least in some people's minds, in funding for the veterans hospitals and the Veterans Administration.
That's right.
Where is our country going to go, our people, our public going to go with this in general?
Well, I would say it's a commitment. Everyone has the yellow ribbons around the tree when they have a loved one or a family member or someone in the community deployed. When they come home, they take the ribbon off. I'd ask them to keep the yellow ribbon on. That commitment to soldier doesn't end upon coming home. When you come home with different service-connected disabilities, when you come home injured, when you come home disabled, when you have put your life on hold for a number of years, that commitment continues, and that's what I would ask our communities to do. Keep the commitment alive. Nebraska is very supportive of her deployed men and women in uniform. We need to be as supportive for veterans, and I'm not so sure that we're not, Carol. You know, I was a state senator, and no one ever came up to me as a state senator saying, you know, we're capping this NVA fund. We're having to put more limitations on it. I'm bringing this to our policymakers. We need to discuss this. It's not like we've gone every year and been rejected. This is going to be a very educational experience, I believe, for many of our state senators.
So a lot of it is just the knowledge, and then I'm sure that it will be a challenge to find additional funds, no matter which way you go. And then there's a question of how much additional. Is just to stay on course of where the lawmakers years and years ago wanted us to be, or are there new needs that are totally different because of new wars?
Well, and how Nebraska spends her money. The governor and the legislature passed LB 1083 on how we serve our mentally ill. Okay. In my former life, when I worked for Catholic Charities, we ran the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program for Omaha. And we had discovered and outreached and found 400 homeless veterans in Omaha, many of them suffering for dual diagnosis, mental health and substance abuse. When one of these veterans applies for admission into our veterans home, the veterans home system, which is run by Health and Human Services, has a legitimate stand. They say we can't serve.
We're not equipped for dual diagnosis.
We're not equipped for this, and that's legitimate. You don't want to mix populations. You want to keep the population secure in the nursing homes, and that's fine. What's unacceptable is that Nebraska has nowhere to refer these individuals. And
they don't have a place to refer a lot of non-veteran dual diagnoses.
You know, but you know,
I see what you're saying.
My job description. And what I would like to do is explore ways of looking at federal grants that other states are getting, the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, the Homeless Veterans Per Diem, McKinney, looking at different things, trying to combine those with Medicaid, reaching out to the nonprofit sector, which I do have some experience with, and say we need a place to refer these individuals. They are in our community whether we have a place or not. And we're going to end up serving these individuals where we have a place or not.
Well, LB 1083
I didn't mean to go into that.
No, but what I'm saying, and we'll move on to the new veterans home, but it does say that we should do certain things for our people in the state. So in a way that might help you.
I think it coincides. I've talked to Steve Curtis. The governor has said, John, go try to figure this out. Go advocate. Go talk to the nonprofits, research federal programs, see if we can't find a way to serve these veterans, especially these dual diagnoses.
Are other states drawing down federal money that maybe we're not accessing
I believe
because
they are.
of certain things we do or don't do?
I believe we are. And it's part of our tradition. We've been kind of a quiet, humble state.
And we don't like to ask.
You know, and I'm an asking director. I mean, I'm not afraid of getting in the newspaper. I'm not afraid of bringing things to light to our policymakers to say that we need this help. Let's illuminate this. When I came on board, in the past, the Director of Veterans Affairs didn't even have access, for example, to the waiting list to our veterans' homes. Now we're helping manage that. We're tracking that with HHS. Any county can call up my office and say, I have this veteran who needs this type of care that wants to go, for example, to Scottsbluff or the Thomas Fitzgerald home here in Omaha. What's the waiting list for that area of care? And we're going to be able to tell them exactly how many is on that waiting list. We're able to track things more, which makes everything more efficient. It serves our veterans better because they can actually see what's going on in our system better. And also does another thing that I like as a former policymaker. It illuminates the areas of need. The dual diagnosis, which I was talking about.
We've got numbers to back this up.
I have numbers. And I can go to our policymakers and say, we have a huge waiting list for Alzheimer's, for example. We may need to go in that direction. That's an example. So I think part of my job, what I'm trying to do as a director, is to kind of, well, I said drain the pond a little bit and see what's there. Let's see what we're doing right. Let's see what we could be doing better. Let's see where the gaps are. And I'm not afraid to say there's gaps here. We need to address this.
Now, why hasn't this been done before? And I'm not being critical of any past director. Was it just that things weren't that I mean, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. If you need to find better ways to do something because you've got a new need or you're not meeting old needs, then you think of doing some of these things?
Every director's been very, very committed to veterans.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
And
I mean,
I want to make that clear. But you have a director here that my limitations in my prior life as a state senator was: is it unconstitutional? If it wasn't unconstitutional, all it takes is 25 people and the signature of the governor, and we have reality in Nebraska. So I'm looking at things perhaps from a different perspective.
And then your Catholic Social Services,
Right.
Catholic Charities background, you know how the system can work pairing up. We don't want the government to do everything. We don't want to establish.
And we can't.
Right.
Don't
but
have
we
money.
know how well it's worked
That's right.
with the medical and social service system.
And we know that there's committed people in our community that are willing to do the job. And they don't need to make a lot of money, obviously, with our Catholic Charities. There's no one that gets rich that works at Catholic Charities or Lutheran Family Services or Child Saving Institute, et cetera, et cetera. These are committed individuals in our community that just say, give us the tools to do the job and we'll do them. And I've been approached by those people. And I want to try to link that together and make it happen.
Okay, now, you've got a lot on your plate as it is, but let me
A lot.
throw a few more things out.
Finding more all the time, Carol.
I think the veterans are probably grateful, even though they may not be familiar with everything you're doing. We're going to have a new veterans home in
Yes.
Sarpy County, which is obviously a burgeoning population. Douglas and Sarpy and Cass and Washington, I mean, the surrounding counties are having veterans
That's
that
huge.
need to go in the veterans home. Now, do you handle that, or is that a separate?
I've been tasked to help handle that.
But in the past, you talked about not talking to
Well,
one another, having figures. Who actually is in charge?
most of the time it was Health and Human Services. I was one of the senators that helped push the study that looked into it and so forth. So it was kind of a natural thing. That's one of the reasons the governors thought it was a good fit. See it through to construction, John, and let's make sure we get this done. We applied for funds, and in the first year of application, not only did we get on the list of being funded, we are the #1 project in the United States for new construction.
So obviously, per capita, there's a great need. Per capita veteran that we're underserving.
Well, actually, we're a little overbedded. I don't know how Nebraska did this, but we have more beds in our state veterans home system than by federal we should have.
Then how did we get a priority?
We got a waiver. And we had a waiver, and what we're doing is we're not saying these aren't new beds, we're just replacing the old beds that we had at Thomas Fitzgerald. And we've been able to work with, I even, out of my own pocket, I bought him flowers, the guy who runs the program. It was a lot of fun. I've been over to Vermont Street in Washington, D.C. a couple of times. I talked to the administrator of the homes. He wants to build homes. He wants to have veterans services access, and I made it very, very easy. In fact,
this is a good news. This is
it's
a
huge.
really good news thing.
Norfolk, I believe, had to wait 4 or 5 years to get funded. We did it in year 1. And
is it 100% fed, or is it
it's
matching?
65% fed, but that's only for the construction of the building. All the land acquisition and all the infrastructure, we need to find out how to make that happen. In fact, a few people may not know this, our match didn't come from general funds. The governor and the legislature, let's talk about priority, what veterans have, we use the cash reserve to match this.
Ooh, that doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very
but
often.
the need was there.
In fact, the only capital construction in that budget of over that biennial budget was a new veterans home for eastern Nebraska. So it's a huge commitment from the governor and from our senators that have supported it. The federals, we worked well with them. We got it #1 on the list. The land we're negotiating right now, the lawyers have it. Bellevue City has some property. They came to us with a proposal. We accepted it, and now we're trying to work out the details of 20 acres for the veterans home. Sarpy County has come to the plate and has committed $300,000 to help the infrastructure, the road to get to the home from Capehart. We're talking to other local government subdivisions, and everyone is coming together to help make this a reality. It's a priority.
What strikes me is that, and this is no bad reference to where the Thomas Fitzgerald was out in western Douglas County, but the fact that it's the proximity to the air base, I would think there might be some connections made there.
Well, I think that's why
volunteer
Bellevue and
things.
Sarpy County has come forward. They're very much of a veterans community, and they want this home in their community. And they had the resources. We were lucky enough to have this community have the resources available to marry our need with their resources at this time. It's a great fit. And we appreciate, and Douglas County has done a great job. They own the Thomas Fitzgerald home, by the way, on 156 and Maple, and they've been renting it to us at the high rate of $1 a year. Douglas County, over the years, has time and again exhibited their support, but right now the resources, we're in another community. Douglas County or the city didn't have 20 free acres to give us. In fact, try to find 20 acres of undeveloped and not slated land in Douglas County.
It's hard. It's almost impossible.
It is very expensive if you want to build here.
How many full-time staff members do you have, including yourself?
14 in our department.
And they cover the whole,
Yes. We have 7 in our service office, and the rest is administration. We're actually able to add one staff member since I've been director. The relationship that I talked about regarding the waiting list and how the homes are and that whole
Someone's
thing.
taking care of that.
We've devoted a full-time staff person, and I want to thank Ron Ross, who helped make that a reality. When other budgets were being diminished because of the financial situation, we were able to transfer some money, $88,000, I believe, from Health and Human Services to Veterans Affairs to fully fund that position and to make that work.
So
and we're appreciative of that.
We're seeing from the things you say that there is support for our veterans.
There's a lot of support.
We have just about a minute left. If you had the Veterans Director magic wand, and yes, there are many priorities, so you don't want to give favoritism to one. What are the things that really need to be done that can have the most bang for the buck in the short?
I'd say let's fill the gaps. Let's fill the gaps. For example, our dual diagnosis. Let's access the federal funds that we have for other projects. For example, our cemeteries. State veteran cemeteries, those are fully funded construction. We can work with local governments and the private sector to make this a reality. We need to work more with our local governments and with the private sector to make these veterans programs a reality. But the dual diagnosis would be one of the big things. And then also giving more support to our counties to have them do the jobs. The county veteran service officers often have very limited resources. I'd like to find a way to give them more resources, to make that partnership even stronger and to make them more effective. And a lot of people haven't said no to veterans, and I'm going to keep on pushing the envelope.
So the thing is, you're going to push it and you want people to know this, so if they hear these things coming up in Lincoln next time around.
Talk to your state senator and have them call John Hilgert.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, Carol.
John Hilgert, former state senator, with us today. Want to thank you, and thank you for joining us, and I know that we support our veterans.
Thank you.
To view this edition of Consider This or past programs, visit our website at unotv.unomaha.edu. For comments or questions, call 402-554-2516 during regular business hours. Consider This is a production of UNO Television.